I've earned 30 plus certifications, and I'm here to guide you to success on your exam. Welcome to the Ultimate AZ-700 Exam Masterclass. Are you ready to crack the AZ-700 exam in one go? You're in the right place. In this session, we'll arm you with powerful insights and hand-picked questions that can make all the difference in your exam performance. We've scanned the web using intelligent crawlers to gather the most critical and high-impact questions, all compiled into one powerful PDF resource. You can download it from the link in the description. Not only will we explore these must-practice questions, but we'll also share real exam experiences and pro tips to give you that competitive edge. Let's dive into the key questions that could shape your success. Question 1. You need to connect VNet 2 and VNet 3. The solution must meet the virtual networking requirements and the business requirements. Which two actions should you include in the solution? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note, each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. On the peering from VNet 1, select Allow Gateway Transit. B. On the peerings from VNet 2 and VNet 3, select Use Remote Gateways. C. On the peerings from VNet 2 and VNet 3, select Allow Gateway Transit. D. On the peering from VNet 1, select Use Remote Gateways. E. On the peering from VNet 1, select Allow Forwarded Traffic. Correct answer A and B. On the peering from VNet 1, select Allow Gateway Transit. On the peerings from VNet 2 and VNet 3, select Use Remote Gateways. Explanation. Allowing gateway transit on VNet 1 and enabling use of remote gateways on VNet 2 and VNet 3 lets them share one VPN or ExpressRoute gateway, meeting both connectivity and business needs. Question 2. You need to configure GW1 to meet the network security requirements for the P2S VPN users. Which tunnel type should you select in the point-to-site configuration settings of GW1? A. IKV2 and OpenVPN SSL. B. IKV2. C. IKV2 and SSDP SSL. D. OpenVPN SSL. E. SSDP SSL. Correct answer D. OpenVPN SSL. Explanation. OpenVPN SSL is secure, firewall-friendly, and works across multiple devices and networks, meeting the security requirements without the limitations of older protocols. Question 3. You need to provide access to storage too. The solution must meet the past networking requirements and the business requirements. Which connectivity method should you use? A. A private endpoint. B. Azure Firewall. C. Azure Front Door. D. A service endpoint. Correct answer A. A private endpoint. Explanation. A private endpoint uses a private IP from your virtual network, ensuring secure, isolated access to the past service while meeting business needs. Question 4. You need to provide access to storage 1. The solution must meet the past networking requirements and the business requirements. What should you include in the solution? A. A private endpoint. B. Azure Traffic Manager. C. Azure Front Door. D. A service endpoint. Correct answer A. A private endpoint. Explanation. A private endpoint securely connects storage 1 to your virtual network using a private IP, isolating traffic from the public internet while meeting all requirements. Question 5. You have an Azure subscription that is linked to an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, tenant named contoso.onmicrosoft.com. The subscription contains the following resources: an Azure App Service app named App1, an Azure DNS zone named contoso.com, an Azure Private DNS zone named private.contoso.com, a virtual network named VNet1. You create a private endpoint for App1. The record for the endpoint is registered automatically in Azure DNS. You need to provide a developer with the name that is registered in Azure DNS for the private endpoint. What should you provide? A. app1.contoso.onmicrosoft.com. B. app1.private.contoso.com. C. app1.privatelink.azurewebsites.net. D. app1.contoso.com. Correct answer, C. app1.privatelink.azurewebsites.net. Explanation. Private endpoints for app service use the privatelink.azurewebsites.net domain to route traffic privately, ensuring secure and controlled access to the app. Question 6. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual network named VNet1. VNet1 contains a subnet named Subnet1. You plan to add a private endpoint to subnet. You need to ensure that you can route traffic between the private endpoint and the Azure Private Link service by using a user-defined route. What should you do first on Subnet 1? A. Enable network policy. B. Enable delegation. C. Create a service endpoint. D. Provision a standard Azure load balancer. Correct answer A. Enable network policy. Explanation. Enabling network policy for private endpoints allows user-defined routes and NSGs to apply, making custom routing to the private link service possible. Question 7. You have an Azure virtual network named VNet1 that has one subnet. VNet1 is in the West Europe region. You deploy an Azure App Service app named App1 to the West Europe region. You need to provide App1 with access to the resources in VNet1. The solution must minimize costs. What should you do first? A. Create a private link. B. Create a new subnet. C. Create a NAT gateway. D. Create a gateway subnet and deploy a virtual network gateway. Correct answer B. Create a new subnet. Explanation. An app service integration requires a dedicated subnet, so creating a new subnet allows VNet integration without the higher costs of VPN or gateways. Question 8. You have two Azure subscriptions named Sub1 and Sub2. Sub1 contains a virtual machine named VM1. You plan to make VM1 available to the resources in Sub2 by using Azure Private Link. You need to ensure that the Private Link service can be configured to provide access to VM1. What should you configure in Sub1 first? A. An Azure Private DNS Zone. B. An Azure Load Balancer. C. A Service Endpoint. D. A Private Endpoint. Correct answer B. An Azure Load Balancer. Explanation. A load balancer is required to front the VM for a private link service, enabling external access over a private IP across subscriptions. Question 9. You have an on-premises network named Site1. You have an Azure subscription that contains a storage account named Storage1 and a virtual network named VNet1. VNet1 contains a subnet named Subnet1. A private endpoint for Storage1 is connected to Subnet1. Site1 is connected to VNet1 by using a site-to-site S2S VPN. You need to control access to Storage1 from Site1 by using network security groups, NSGs. What should you do first? A. Configure a network policy for private endpoints on Subnet 1. B. Create a subnet delegation on Subnet 1. C. Associate a route table with Subnet 1. D. Associate a NAT gateway with Subnet 1. Correct answer A. Configure a network policy for private endpoints on Subnet 1. Explanation. NSGs require network policy to be enabled on private endpoints, allowing filtering and control of traffic coming from the on-premises network. Question 10. You have an Azure Private Link service named PL1 that uses an Azure Load Balancer named LB1. You need to ensure that PL1 can support a higher volume of outbound traffic. What should you do? A. Increase the number of front-end IP configurations for LB1. B. Increase the number of NAT IP addresses assigned to PL1. C. Deploy an Azure Application Gateway v2 instance to the source NAT subnet. D. Redeploy LB1 with a different SKU. Correct answer B. Increase the number of NAT IP addresses assigned to PL1. Explanation. Adding more NAT IP addresses increases outbound SNAT capacity, allowing the private link service to handle a higher volume of connections. Question 11. You have an on-premises network named Site1. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual network named VNet1 and a storage account named Storage1. Site1 and VNet1 are connected by using a site-to-site S2S VPN. You need to ensure that the servers in Site1 can connect to Storage1 by using the S2S VPN. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you create on VNet1? A. An Azure Application Gateway. B. An Azure Private Link Service. C. A Service Endpoint. D. A Private Endpoint. Correct answer D. A Private Endpoint. Explanation. A private endpoint assigns a private IP to the storage account, enabling secure access from the on-premises network via the existing S2S VPN. Question 12. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure front door named FD1. You plan to deploy an app named App1 by using Azure App Service. Users will access App1 by using FD1. You need to provide FD1 with access to App1. The solution must meet the following requirements. Ensure that users can only access App1 by using FD1. Ensure that users cannot access App1 directly from the internet. What should you create for App1? A. An access restriction. B. A private endpoint. C. A subnet delegation. D. A service endpoint. Correct answer A. An access restriction. Explanation. Access restrictions can limit App1's access to only the front door's incoming traffic, blocking any direct internet access to the service. Question 13. You have an Azure subscription that contains 4 virtual machines. The virtual machines host an app named App1. You deploy an Azure Standard Load Balancer named LB1 to load balance incoming HTTPS requests to App1. You need to reduce how long it takes for LB1 to stop sending App1 traffic to failed servers. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you modify? A. The backend pool settings. B. The diagnostic settings. C. The load balancing rules. D. The health probe settings. Correct answer D. The health probe settings. Explanation. Reducing the probe interval or the number of failed probe attempts in the health probe settings ensures faster detection of failed servers. Question 14. You have an Azure front door instance named FD1 that is protected by using Azure Web Application Firewall, WAF. FD1 uses a front-end host named app1.contoso.com to provide access to Azure Web Apps hosted in the East US Azure region and the West US Azure region. You need to configure FD1 to block requests to app1.contoso.com from all countries other than the United States. What should you include in the WAF policy? A. A custom rule that uses a match rule. B. A front-end host association. C. A custom rule that uses a rate limit rule. D. A managed rule set. Correct answer A. A custom rule that uses a match rule. Explanation. A custom match rule in the WAF policy can filter requests based on geographic location, allowing only US traffic while blocking all others. Question 15. You are planning the IP addressing for the subnets in Azure Virtual Networks. Which type of resource requires IP addresses in the subnets? A. Azure DDoS protection for virtual networks. B. Private endpoints. C. Azure Virtual Network NAT. D. Service endpoint policies. Correct answer B. Private endpoints. Explanation. Private endpoints consume IP addresses from the subnet where they are placed, since they are network interfaces tied to private resources. Question 16. Your company has a single on-premises data center in Washington, D.C. The East U.S. Azure region has a peering location in Washington, D.C. The company only has Azure resources in the East U.S. region. You need to implement ExpressRoute to support up to 1 gigabit per second. You must use only ExpressRoute unlimited data plans. The solution must minimize costs. Which type of ExpressRoute circuits should you create? A. ExpressRoute Local. B. ExpressRoute Direct. C. ExpressRoute Premium. D. ExpressRoute Standard. Correct answer A. ExpressRoute Local. Explanation. ExpressRoute Local is the most cost-effective for a single region when the peering location is in the same metro area as the data center. Question 17. You are planning an Azure point-to-site P2S VPN that will use OpenVPN. Users will authenticate by an on-premises Active Directory domain. Which additional service should you deploy to support the VPN authentication? A. An Azure Key Vault. B. A Radius server. C. A certification authority. D. Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, application proxy. Correct answer B. A Radius server. Explanation. A Radius server integrates with on-premises Active Directory to authenticate VPN users, enabling secure OpenVPN connections. Question 18. You plan to configure BGP for a site-to-site VPN connection between a data center and Azure. Which 2 Azure resources should you configure? Each correct answer presents a part of the solution. Choose 2. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. A virtual network gateway. B. Azure Application Gateway. C. Azure Firewall. D. A local network gateway. E. Azure Front Door. Correct answer A and D. A virtual network gateway. A local network gateway. Explanation. BGP requires both a virtual network gateway on Azure and a local network gateway representing the on-premises network for dynamic route exchange. Question 19. You failed to establish a site-to-site VPN connection between your company's main office and an Azure virtual network. You need to troubleshoot what prevents you from establishing the IPsec tunnel. Which diagnostic log should you review? A. IK diagnostic log. B. Route diagnostic log. C. Gateway diagnostic log. D. Tunnel diagnostic log. Correct answer A. IK diagnostic log. Explanation. The IK diagnostic log records IKE phase negotiations, which are critical for diagnosing failures when establishing an IPsec VPN tunnel. Question 20. You have an Azure virtual network and an on-premises data center. You are planning a site-to-site VPN connection between the data center and the virtual network. Which 2 resources should you include in your plan? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. A user-defined route. B. A virtual network gateway. C. Azure Firewall. D. Azure Web Application Firewall, WAF. E. An on-premises data gateway. F. An Azure Application Gateway. G. A local network gateway. Correct answer B and G. A virtual network gateway. A local network gateway. Explanation. A virtual network gateway is required in Azure, and a local network gateway defines the on-premises VPN device settings for the connection. Question 21. Your company has offices in New York and Amsterdam. The company has an Azure subscription. Both offices connect to Azure by using a site-to-site VPN connection. The office in Amsterdam uses resources in the North Europe Azure region. The office in New York uses resources in the East US Azure region. You need to implement ExpressRoute circuits to connect each office to the nearest Azure region. Once the ExpressRoute circuits are connected, the on-premises computers in the Amsterdam office must be able to connect to the on-premises servers in the New York office by using the ExpressRoute circuits. Which ExpressRoute option should you use? A. ExpressRoute FastPath. B. ExpressRoute Global Reach. C. ExpressRoute Direct. D. ExpressRoute Local. Correct answer B. ExpressRoute Global Reach. Explanation. ExpressRoute Global Reach allows connecting two on-premises sites via their respective ExpressRoute circuits, enabling private traffic flow between them. Question 22. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual network. You plan to deploy an Azure VPN gateway and 90 site-to-site VPN connections. The solution must meet the following requirements. Ensure that the site-to-site VPN connections remain available if an Azure data center fails. Minimize costs. Which gateway SKU should you specify? A. VPN GW1AZ. B. VPN GW2AZ. C. VPN GW4AZ. D. VPN GW5AZ. Correct answer, C. VPN GW4AZ. Explanation. VPN GW4AZ supports high connection counts with zone redundancy for resiliency, meeting the availability needs for 90 S2S VPN connections. Question 23. You have 3 on-premises networks. You have an Azure subscription that contains a basic Azure Virtual WAN. The Virtual WAN contains a single virtual hub and a virtual network gateway that is limited to a throughput of 1 gigabit per second. The on-premises networks connect to the Virtual WAN by using site-to-site S2S VPN connections. You need to increase the throughput of the Virtual WAN to 3 gigabits per second. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you do? A. Upgrade the Virtual WAN to the standard SKU. B. Add an additional VPN gateway to the Azure subscription. C. Create an additional virtual hub. D. Increase the number of gateway scale units. Correct answer D. Increase the number of gateway scale units. Explanation. Increasing the gateway scale units raises the throughput capacity without needing new hubs or gateways, minimizing configuration changes. Question 24. You have 10 on-premises networks that are connected by using a third-party software-defined wide area network (SD-WAN) solution. You have an Azure subscription that contains 5 virtual networks. You plan to connect the Azure virtual networks and the on-premises networks by using an Azure Virtual WAN with a single Virtual WAN hub. You need to ensure that the Azure Virtual WAN can act as a node in the third-party SD-WAN solution. What should you include in the solution? A. An Azure Virtual WAN ExpressRoute gateway. B. A network virtual appliance (NVA). C. A site-to-site gateway (VPN gateway). D. A point-to-site gateway (User VPN gateway). Correct answer B. A network virtual appliance (NVA). Explanation. Deploying a network virtual appliance enables integration between Azure Virtual WAN and a third-party SD-WAN solution. Question 25. You have an on-premises data center and an Azure subscription. You plan to implement ExpressRoute FastPath. You need to create an ExpressRoute gateway. The solution must minimize downtime if a single Azure data center fails. Which SKU should you use? A. AirGW1AZ. B. High Performance. C. Ultra Performance. D. AirGW3AZ. E. AirGW2AZ. Correct answer D. AirGW3AZ. Explanation. The AirGW3AZ SKU provides zone-redundant express route gateways with the performance needed for fast path and minimal downtime. Question 26. You have an Azure subscription that contains an ExpressRoute standard gateway named GW1. You need to upgrade GW1 to support ExpressRoute FastPath. The solution must minimize downtime. Which SKU should you use? A. Ultra Performance. B. AirGW3AZ. C. AirGW2AZ. D. High Performance. Correct answer A. Ultra Performance. Explanation. FastPath requires an ultra-performance gateway SKU, which offers the necessary low-latency, high-throughput capabilities. Question 27. You have an on-premises network. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual network. You have an ExpressRoute service provider. You plan to connect the Azure virtual network and the on-premises network by using an ExpressRoute circuit. You create a new ExpressRoute circuit. You need to provision the new circuit. Which information should you provide to the service provider? A. The IKF2 shared key. B. The certificate. C. The public IP address. D. The service key. Correct answer D. The service key. Explanation. The service key uniquely identifies the ExpressRoute circuit and is used by the provider to complete the provisioning process. Question 28. You have an on-premises server named Server 1 that runs Windows Server. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual network named VNet 1. You plan to connect Server 1 to VNet 1 by using Azure Network Adapter. You need to minimize how long it takes to deploy the adapter to Server 1. What should you create first? A. A route server. B. An Azure Bastion host. C. A private endpoint. D. An Azure VPN gateway. Correct answer D. An Azure VPN gateway. Explanation. The Azure Network Adapter requires a VPN gateway to be in place to connect the on-premises server to the virtual network. Question 29. You have an instance of Azure Web Application Firewall, WAF, on Azure Front Door. You plan to create a WAF rule that will block high rates of requests from a single IP address. You need to query log analytics to identify the optimal threshold for the rule. Which table should you query in log analytics? A. AZFW Threat Intel. B. Azure Diagnostics. C. Security Detection. D. AGW Firewall Logs. Correct answer B. Azure Diagnostics. Explanation. The Azure Diagnostics table contains detailed WAF and front door request logs that can be analyzed to determine request thresholds. Question 30. You have an Azure Application Gateway named AppGW1 that balances requests to a web app named App1. You need to modify the server variables in the response header of App1. What should you configure on AppGW1? A. URL rewrite rules. B. Path-based rules. C. Listeners. D. HTTP settings. Correct answer A. URL rewrite rules. Explanation. URL rewrite rules allow you to modify request and response headers, including server variables, before they reach or leave App1. Please revise full PDF 2 to 3 times for 100% success. Check the description for the PDF download link and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for upcoming episodes. Thank you.